What does it mean to be glad that your mother is dead? It is a shocking, taboo, and almost unthinkable sentiment. It feels like a violation of the most sacred bond in human life. But for the actress and writer Jennette McCurdy, in her courageous, heartbreaking, and darkly funny memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, it is the only honest statement possible. This is not a story about hate, it is a story about the complex, painful, and ultimately liberating process of finding your own life after surviving a lifetime of abuse. It is the story of a child star who was beloved by millions on television, but who was secretly living a nightmare of anxiety, eating disorders, and obsessive control. This is more than a celebrity memoir, it is a profound philosophical inquiry into the nature of trauma, the search for identity, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It is the story of a woman who, in order to save herself, had to kill the idea of the mother she was supposed to love. The Gilded Cage, a mother's dream, a daughter's prison. To understand Jennette's story, you have to understand the all-consuming and deeply damaging relationship she had with her mother, Deborah. The central theme of her childhood is a psychological concept called enmeshment, a situation where the boundaries between a parent and a child completely dissolve. Jennette did not exist as a separate person. She existed as an extension of her mother's own unfulfilled dreams and anxieties. Deborah had always dreamed of being an actress, a dream that never came true. So, she projected that dream with a ferocious and obsessive intensity onto her only daughter. From the age of 6, Jennette's life was no longer her own. It was a full-time job, and the job was to become a star to make her mother happy. Her life became a relentless series of acting classes, auditions, and a constant pressure to perform. This control was total. Her mother controlled what she ate, what she wore, how she thought, and what she felt. When Jennette was just 11 years old, her mother introduced her to calorie restriction as a way to delay puberty and keep her looking young so she could get more child roles. This was the beginning of a devastating, lifelong battle with eating disorders. Her mother would weigh her 5 times a day and celebrate when she lost weight. Food was not nourishment, it was a tool of control. The abuse was not just about food, it was a complete invasion of her being. Her mother insisted on showering her until she was 16 years old. She performed invasive exams on her breasts and genitals, under the guise of checking for cancer. She read her diaries and her emails. There was no privacy, no personal space, no room for Jennette to develop her own identity, her own thoughts, her own desires. Her only purpose was to be a mirror, reflecting back her mother's own needs. The love she received was entirely conditional. It was a reward for obedience, for success, for being the perfect, happy little girl her mother needed her to be. It was a gilded cage, built from a mother's love, but a prison all the same. The price of fame, the nightmare of a child star, and then, the dream, her mother's dream, came true. After years of relentless auditioning, Jennette was cast as the tough, sarcastic, and food-loving Sam Puckett on the massive Nickelodeon hit show, iCarly. To the outside world, she was a star. She was on television screens in millions of homes, she was famous, she was funny, and she was beloved. She had achieved the goal, and she had never been more miserable in her entire life. The character of Sam was a cruel and constant reminder of everything she was not allowed to be. Sam was loud, confident, and ate whatever she wanted with joyful abandon. Jennette, behind the scenes, was a bundle of anxiety, riddled with obsessive-compulsive disorder and deep in the grips of full-blown anorexia. The irony was devastating. While her character was famous for her love of fried chicken, Jennette was secretly subsisting on tiny, precisely measured portions, her weight obsessively monitored by her mother, who was a constant presence on set. This part of the book is a powerful and heartbreaking look at the massive chasm that can exist between a public persona and a private reality. From the outside, she had it all. But on the inside, she was a prisoner of her eating disorders, of her mother's suffocating control, and of the crushing pressure to maintain the illusion that she was a happy, well-adjusted teen idol. After iCarly, she was cast in a spin-off show, Sam and Cat, alongside Ariana Grande. The pressures only intensified. The gap between her own miserable reality and the cheerful character she had to play on screen became a source of profound psychological distress. She describes feeling like a puppet, a commodity, her own humanity completely erased by the demands of the entertainment industry and the relentless driving ambition of her mother. The dream was a nightmare, and the only person she could have turned to for help was the very person who had built the prison in the first place. The Unraveling, a world without a center. The great turning point in Jennette's story is also its greatest tragedy. Her mother, who had battled and survived breast cancer years earlier, had a relapse. The cancer came back, and this time, it was terminal. During her mother's final years, Jennette's life became a desperate, all-consuming attempt to keep her happy, to do whatever she could to please her. The roles were now completely reversed. Jennette, the child, became the caregiver for her dying mother. When her mother finally passed away, Jennette didn't feel the simple, clean grief that most people do. She felt a confusing, chaotic, and terrifying mess of emotions. She had lost the central organizing principle of her entire life. The person she had spent every single moment trying to please was gone. The person who had been the source of her deepest pain, but also her deepest love, was gone. And instead of feeling free, she felt completely and utterly lost. This is a crucial philosophical insight of the book. The abuse doesn't stop when the abuser is gone because the abuser's voice is now permanently installed in your own head. The patterns of control, of self-criticism, of seeking approval, were so deeply ingrained in her that she continued to enact them, even after her mother's death. Her life began to completely unravel. Her anorexia morphed into a severe and dangerous bulimia, a chaotic cycle of binging and purging that gave her the illusion of control. She began to drink heavily, to numb the pain and the confusion. She was a ghost, haunted by the memory of her mother and by the terrifying empty space where her mother's all-consuming presence used to be. She was in a free-fall, and she knew she needed help. The long, hard road to healing. The second half of the book is the slow, difficult, and profoundly inspiring story of Jennette's recovery. It is a journey that is not about finding a magic cure, but about the hard, grinding, and often 2 steps forward, 1 step back work of therapy. She is brutally honest about the process. She describes her initial resistance to therapy, her fear of being truly vulnerable, and her long-held belief that she could somehow fix herself on her own. But eventually she finds a good therapist, and she begins the difficult work of untangling the knots of her past. The work of therapy, for her, was about differentiation. It was the slow, painful process of learning to separate her own thoughts, her own feelings, and her own desires from the ones her mother had implanted in her for decades. For the first time in her life, she had to ask herself the most basic and terrifying question: what do I want? And for a long time, the answer was a deafening silence. She had no idea. She learns about the nature of her eating disorders, understanding them not as a strange personal failing, but as a predictable psychological response to a childhood of trauma and a desperate need for control. She learns about the dynamics of abusive and narcissistic families, and most importantly, she learns to have compassion for the little girl she once was. This part of the story is a powerful testament to the real work of healing. It's not about finding a single aha moment. It's about showing up, week after week, and doing the hard, emotional labor of confronting your own past. It's about learning to sit with your own pain, without trying to numb it or escape from it. And it is about the slow, incremental, and deeply courageous process of building a new, healthier relationship with yourself. The philosophy of a new life, quitting the dream. The ultimate act of Jennette's recovery, the final, declarative statement of her own newly formed identity, was a courageous and shocking decision. She decided to quit acting. For her entire life, acting had been her identity. It was her mother's dream for her. It was the source of her fame, her money, and her entire sense of self-worth. But she came to a profound realization. It was never her dream. It was a cage, a performance, a life that had been chosen for her, not by her. To walk away from a successful and lucrative career was an incredible act of courage. It was her first true, authentic vote for herself. It was a declaration that she was no longer going to live a life designed to please her dead mother's ghost. She was going to find a life that was her own. And she found that life in writing. Writing was the one thing that was truly hers. It was a way for her to process her trauma, to make sense of her own story, to find her own unique voice, a voice that was witty and raw and angry and deeply, profoundly human. Writing became her path to healing. It was how she began to build a new identity, not as Jennette McCurdy the actress, the character, but as Jennette McCurdy the writer, the creator, the survivor. I'm Glad My Mom Died is the ultimate result of that journey. The title itself is the final act of defiance. It is her claiming her own story and her own truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes other people. And in the end, you understand what it means. It's not, I'm glad she's gone because I hated her. It's, I'm glad she's gone because her all-consuming abusive presence in my life, and then in my head, made it impossible for me to live. Her death, while tragic, was the only thing that could set me free to finally become myself. Her story is a testament to the fact that recovery isn't a neat finish line. It's a lifelong process of learning to parent yourself, to trust your own voice, and to choose yourself over and over again. It is a difficult, necessary, and ultimately hopeful story about the incredible strength it takes to break a generational cycle of trauma and finally come home to yourself. It is a deep inquiry into the power of speaking the unspeakable. If you believe that we must confront the most difficult truths to find our own freedom, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the courageous stories that force us to confront who we are.